The cabin lights flickered as the Boeing 747 shuddered violently, cutting through one of the fiercest storms ever recorded over the North Atlantic. Passengers jolted awake, screams mixing with the roar of thunder outside. A trembling voice suddenly filled the intercom. It was the co-pilot, James Wilson, and his tone alone was enough to chill everyone to the bone. "Ladies and gentlemen," his voice cracked, "we have a critical emergency. Captain Mitchell has collapsed and is unresponsive. If there is anyone on board with military combat flight experience, we need you now." In seat 23C, a woman stirred from her slumber. Kesha Washington, 34, had learned long ago how to sleep anywhere, a survival skill honed from years of missions where rest was a luxury. But the desperation in Wilson's voice made her instantly alert. All around her, panic was brewing. Children sobbed, prayers rose in different languages, and some passengers frantically typed what they feared might be final messages to loved ones. The turbulence grew worse, rattling the aircraft as rain lashed against the windows like hammers. Up in first class, Richard Blackwood adjusted his expensive glasses and scoffed loudly. "As if anyone on this plane actually qualifies," he muttered, his voice dripping with arrogance. His eyes briefly scanned Kesha, dressed simply in jeans and a blouse, her natural hair tied back casually, and dismissed her immediately. To him, she was just another ordinary traveler, certainly not someone who could possibly help. The co-pilot's voice returned, this time almost breaking. "Please, if anyone has advanced aviation training, especially military, identify yourself now. I cannot handle this storm alone. We are flying blind through conditions I've never faced before." Richard rose abruptly, puffing up his chest. "Listen, kid, my brother-in-law's a private pilot, and I've flown with him dozens of times. I can help." A flight attendant hurried over, shaking her head. "Sir, this situation requires specialized combat aviation skills. Civilian training won't be enough in a Category 5 storm." Richard sneered, indignant. "Are you questioning me? I paid $15,000 for these seats. Trust me, I've got more experience than anyone else here." That was when Kesha stood. Quietly, deliberately, she began walking toward the front. Her steps carried none of the frantic energy of panic, only the steady control of someone used to crisis. Some passengers glanced at her with curiosity. Others rolled their eyes in skepticism. "Excuse me," she said evenly to the attendant. "Colonel Kesha Washington, United States Air Force. Over 500 flight hours in F-22 Raptors. Specialist in extreme condition navigation." The reaction was instant. Gasps rippled through the cabin and Richard's mouth dropped open in disbelief. "You've got to be joking," he muttered. But the calm steel in Kesha's gaze silenced further protest. For the first time, the frightened passengers realized they might not just be looking at an ordinary woman. They were looking at someone who carried with her the kind of strength, discipline, and experience that only came from surviving storms far greater than this one. She ignored the manuals that dictated procedure and leaned entirely on her experience. "And the result?" she continued firmly. "Every one of those 17 soldiers made it back alive." Her voice carried a calm conviction that made James realize he was sitting beside someone who wasn't just skilled, she was extraordinary. "James, rules are essential, but sometimes clinging to them can cost lives. True expertise lies in knowing the rules so well that you understand exactly when to break them. That's the difference between surviving and leading." Before James could respond, the cockpit door opened abruptly. Richard Blackwood had persuaded a nervous attendant to let him through. His voice dripped with disdain. "This is reckless nonsense. You're endangering all of us. I insist on direct communication with air traffic control." Kesha didn't even look at him. "Mr. Blackwood, this isn't a private lounge. Get back to your seat before you interfere further." "Tourist?" Richard's face flushed. "I've logged more hours in private jets than you'll ever imagine. What you're doing is suicide." Before the tension could escalate further, a calm female voice cut in. Dr. Patricia Chun, chief neurosurgeon at Johns Hopkins, had stepped forward. "Colonel Washington, I'm Dr. Chun. I spent years in military hospitals working with injured pilots. I can monitor Captain Mitchell." Kesha glanced back briefly. In that instant, there was silent recognition between two professionals who had both dedicated their lives to saving others in impossible circumstances. "Doctor, it's an honor. He's stable for now, but your oversight will be invaluable." Richard's eyes widened in disbelief. "This is madness. A conspiracy to get us killed." Dr. Chun faced him with the calm patience of someone who had navigated countless families through crises. "Mr. Blackwood, I've treated enough pilots to recognize real authority. This woman has training that money cannot buy. If you want to live, trust her." Richard scoffed bitterly. Trust? Based on what, her word? That's when Kesha made her next move. Without looking away from the storm ahead, she ordered, "James, tune in to emergency military frequency 121.5. Establish contact with Andrews Air Force Base." Her voice sharpened over the radio. "Colonel Kesha Washington, call sign Spectre. Confirming identity for civil aviation emergency." The response came immediately. "Spectre, is that really you? This is Commander Rodriguez, Andrews Air Force Base. We lost your radar signal 20 minutes ago. The entire force is mobilized trying to locate you." The cabin behind them fell utterly silent. Richard's bravado drained away as his face turned pale. He had mocked her, dismissed her, and now discovered he was in the presence of one of the most celebrated pilots in American military history. Kesha continued briskly, unfazed. "Andrews, we have dual emergencies, medical incapacitation of captain and severe weather conditions. Requesting immediate coordinates for safe landing with 747 capability. Spectre, you have top priority. We are diverting you to Baltimore International. Emergency medical teams already en route." Dr. Chun smirked slightly as she glanced at Richard. Do many tourists have the U.S. Air Force scrambling to clear the skies for them? But what no one yet understood was that the crisis was far from over. This was only the beginning. Moments later, Commander Rodriguez's voice returned grim. "Spectre, the system is worsening. Winds over 180 kilometers an hour, hail larger than baseballs. Regional airports are shutting down. You are the only aircraft airborne over the East Coast." Richard sank back, realizing this wasn't a mere emergency, it was a nightmare no one should have survived. Kesha turned to James, her voice steady. "We'll need to track vertical speed carefully. I'm about to attempt something no Boeing 747 has ever done before." James' eyes darted to the instruments. "Colonel, what exactly are you attempting?" "Controlled spiral descent," she said simply, adjusting the controls with smooth precision. "A fighter jet maneuver adapted for a wide-body aircraft. You're going to ride the eye of the storm." Richard's legs nearly gave way as the enormity of what she was suggesting hit him. This wasn't flying, it was rewriting the limits of aviation itself. Suddenly, a new voice cut through the static. "Spectre, this is General Hayes from the Pentagon. Confirming, you are the pilot who guided a malfunctioning C-130 through a desert sandstorm in Operation Tempest Shield, correct?" "Confirmed, General," Kesha replied calmly, still at the controls. "Different storm, same principles." James blinked in disbelief. "You guided an entire aircraft from the ground? Without even being on board?" Kesha's eyes stayed locked on the horizon. 17 times, James. When you learn to read atmospheric patterns like a living map, you can guide anything with wings, even blind. For the first time, Richard understood the full weight of his prejudice. The woman he had dismissed as unqualified was not just skilled, she was a legend studied by militaries worldwide. As the Boeing spiraled downward, lightning flashing around them like the wrath of gods, Kesha kept her focus. "General Hayes, I'll need Dover Air Force Base cleared for landing. Full medical and fire support on standby. Spectre, Dover is ready. Foam on the runway, ambulance is prepped. You have absolute clearance." James' voice cracked. "How are you even keeping this jet stable? 4,000 feet per minute descent, it should be tearing apart." Kesha allowed herself the faintest smile. Applied physics, and 17 years of surviving the impossible. The passengers clung to their seats as the jet sliced through chaos. Richard's arrogance crumbled with every second. He had spent his life confusing privilege with ability, but now, in the most terrifying flight of his existence, competence was all that mattered, and it wore the face of the woman he had once dismissed. When the 747 finally touched down, the world would come to know the truth. Kesha Washington was not just a survivor, not just a soldier, but a force of nature whose story would change aviation forever.